Hello, this will be the tutorial for lesson number 13, Functions with Artist, and it'll cover puzzles 7 through 12. So let's begin. Here's puzzle number 7. So when you get here, you'll notice that there is already a function for draw a square, and they changed the title to draw a square, which means that if you go into functions, there will be a green block called draw a square. And there it is. Now they also brought out a blank function and they titled it draw a line of functions, and that created this one. Your job is to populate this block. And since you already have a function for drawing a square, you are going to use that function to create this row. They called it draw a line of squares. It doesn't matter if you say draw a line or draw a row. In any case, in order to draw a line of squares, I'm going to move this one out of the way. We are going to populate this one first with draw a square, because that is the very first thing that we should have him do. He will draw a square, but then we're going to make him hop from this spot all the way over here. So let's include a jump forward by 100 pixels. Now we need him to do that a total of 3 times. Draw a square, hop, draw a square, hop, draw a square, hop. We need him to do that a total of 3 times. So we are going to go get a loop, put it inside the function block, put both of those blocks inside, and we only need him to do it a total of 3 times. Because we populated this block, which is called draw a line of squares, should now produce a line of squares. Click continue when you're ready. This is puzzle number 8, and you'll notice that there is the same row of squares that we had a moment ago, but another row of squares right under it that seem to be alternating. So we do have the draw a square function that we had a moment ago for the previous puzzle, and we have the draw a line of squares function, which you populated just a moment ago. We're going to use both of these since both of those exist within the functions category. You'll see them right here. We are going to be able to use those to create another function, one where he will draw 2 separate rows of squares. Let's begin by adding draw a line of squares and make sure that it works. Here's the problem. He is still looking forward as if he wanted to go forward in this direction. Well, what we want him to do is we want him to turn all the way around so he'll be ready to go in the opposite direction. And the only way to do that is to make him turn until he's facing the opposite direction. In order to do that, we need to change this number from 90 to 180. So he drew the same row of squares as before, except this time he is now facing the opposite direction. You should be able to add another function called draw a line of squares and successfully draw 2 alternating lines of squares. However, I want to take this a step forward. In anticipation of the upcoming puzzles, let's create a function with these. So grab an empty function block, and we're going to call this staggered squares. And that's what we're going to call this shape that includes 3 squares going this way and 3 squares going the opposite direction. We're going to call them staggered squares. And we're going to put all of these blocks inside. And by doing this, when you go to functions, there should now be a green block called staggered squares. There it is. And that one block should produce the shapes that we want. Here is puzzle number 9. And again, we created a function to draw both of these rows of squares a moment ago. So if I go to functions, there should be a green block to draw 1 square. There should also be a green block to draw a row of squares, and there should be a green block to draw staggered squares. The directions here, however, say use everything that you've learned so far to recreate this design. Therefore, we are going to have to create the function for drawing a square. We are going to have to create the function for drawing a row of squares. And we are going to have to create the function for staggered squares. So let's begin. Let's do the first one for drawing a simple square and call it draw a square. We're going to need a loop. Since squares have 4 sides, we're going to leave the number 4. We are going to add a move forward block. However, the squares are only 50 pixels on its side, so change that number to 50 and take a turn left. Now, since we populated this function for draw a square, if we go to functions and take out that particular block and add it here, you'll see that it does in fact draw one square. Now that we know that works, I'm going to go ahead and put it back. Now let's work on the next function, which is for drawing a row of squares. So let's make sure that we call it that. Draw a row of squares. And in reality, you can call it whatever you want, just make sure that it is appropriate for school. Now, in order to draw a square, if you remember correctly, we do need a draw a square, and we do need a jump forward by 100 pixels. And we also need a loop because we needed him to be able to do that a total of 3 times. Now, since we populated this, we should be able to go to functions, pull out the draw a row of squares block, and prove that it does draw a row. Now that those are done, let's do the next one, which was to draw staggered squares. So call it staggered squares. For that, we needed a function of drawing a row of squares, and then we also needed him to turn, and this is where we had him turn to the right, and we had him turn 180 degrees, and then draw another row of squares. And by populating this function, if we go into functions and find the one called staggered squares, it should in fact draw 2 rows of squares. Okay, now that we have completed that, we need to go ahead and create the rest of this pattern, which will have him draw another set of staggered squares here and another row of staggered squares here. In order to do that, however, we need to get him from where he ended up down to this corner. So what I would have him do is turn to the right, actually turn to the left by 90 degrees. Watch where he ends up. Notice that a moment ago he was looking towards the left, but now he's looking south. Now I'm going to make him jump to this corner by adding a jump forward by 100 pixels. That is the corner that we wanted. However, I want him to be facing this way because I'm going to ask him to repeat everything that he has done up until now, but he needs to be facing the direction that I want, and that will be a turn left. Okay, now that he is in the corner that we want and he's facing the direction that we want, we're going to make him do everything a total of 3 times. All of this is considered 1. All of this will be considered 2. And all of this will be considered 3. So get a loop, put it on there, put that in there, and replace that with the number 3. Now, we could take all of this, put it inside of an empty function, and call it something else. In this case, I'm just going to leave it like this, but we could do that if we needed to. Okay, puzzle number 10. And it is a challenge puzzle. Click I'm ready. So in this case, they're kind of leaving you to your own devices, but now you have the skills. You're just practicing what we've been doing this entire time. The directions say create this image using the limited blocks provided. Each triangle has sides of 50 pixels. To draw a diamond, you will need to alternate between turning 60 degrees and 120 degrees. We're going to do the same thing that we did a moment ago. We're going to begin by creating the function for the simplest pattern in this picture, which is just a simple triangle. So let's call this draw a triangle. A triangle has 3 sides. So get a loop and replace the number with a 3. The 2 actions required are a move forward, and the directions tell us that the sides are 50 pixels long, so change that to 50, and take a turn left. Now in this case, we're going to turn to the right, And because it is a triangle, we're not turning by 90 degrees, we're turning by 120 degrees. Having done this, we populated this function. That means that in functions over here, there should be a green block that is now called draw a triangle. Let's see if it works according to this program that we wrote. And it does. Now the next thing to do is to write the next function, which will draw not just one triangle, but an entire row of triangles. So call this one draw a row of triangles. And the first thing we're going to do, of course, is we're going to put the function called draw a triangle inside. But then we need him to jump. I'm going to put that here and jump by 50 pixels so that he jumps to the next position. And we want him to do this a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So we're going to need a loop. Put that inside the function. Put that in there. I do, in fact, need him to draw 4 squares, so we're going to leave that number 4 there. Now, if I go to functions, there should be a block called draw a row of triangles that should draw an entire row of triangles. Let's see if it works. And that's it. So now that we have our two functions, I'm going to move these out of the way for just a moment because we do need to add blocks to this program here. You'll notice that where he's standing, he is looking straight forward. I need him to turn so that he's looking sideways down here. Now, it did tell us here to draw a diamond, you will need to alternate between turning 60 degrees and 120 degrees. So I need him to turn to the right by 60 degrees. Watch his face. And he does, in fact, look like he's ready to go this way. So we'll make him draw another row of triangles. Good. However, he's still looking this way diagonally, and I need him to look forward this way completely. And that will be another turn, a turn right. And this time, they did tell us alternate between 60 degrees and 120 degrees. So this one will be 120 degrees. And he should, when we're done, he should be looking this way. And he is. So, last thing, please also notice that we're at 13 out of 14 blocks. The only thing left to do is to ask him to do all of these things a second time. So get a loop, put everything inside, change that to a 2. And there you are. Click continue when you're ready. And here's number 11. Now the directions say this time use lines of 8 hexagons with 25 pixel sides. To make each hexagon, repeat the sides 6 times, turning 60 degrees. Jump 25 pixels between each hexagon. To draw a diamond, you will need to alternate between turning 60 degrees and 120 degrees, similar to the last one. So, again, begin with the simplest shape in this picture, which is a hexagon. So let's call this one draw a hexagon. To draw a hexagon, we will need a move forward. Now they did tell us in here that each hexagon will have 25 pixel sides. So change that to 25. It did say to turn by 60 degrees. Turn to the right by 60 degrees. It says to make each hexagon, repeat the side 6 times, turning 60 degrees. It also says to do it 6 times total because a hexagon has 6 sides. So if we change that 4 to a 6, this now populated will produce one simple hexagon. And if I go to functions, there will be a green block called draw a hexagon. And let's see if it does in fact draw one hexagon. And it does. So now the next function that we need to create is one where he will draw a row of hexagons. So go get a blank function. We're going to call this one draw a row of hexagons. And the first thing we're going to do, of course, is put in a hexagon. And then we're going to make him jump forward 25 pixels because that is the space in between each hexagon. And we're going to need him to do 6 total hexagons. Actually, I'm sorry, 8 hexagons. So we're going to get a loop, put everything inside of it, and the number 8. So according to our program, he will draw 8 hexagons in a row if we go to functions and get the block that's called draw a row of hexagons. Very good. Last but least, of course, is to make him turn to the right. And they did tell us to make him turn by 60 degrees the first time and by 120 degrees the second time. Go to functions again, draw a second row of hexagons, and finally, the last turn will be 120 degrees. All of this, they tell us, up in the directions. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. The only thing left, of course, is to have him do every single thing twice. So put everything that you have created inside a loop with the number 2. That's my mistake. I forgot to change this to 120, or rather, I did change it, but I didn't make sure that it stuck. So let's try that again. When you are ready, click continue. And here is puzzle number 12. It is the last one for this unit, and they have already created several functions for you. The directions say inspiration, use what you've learned to make whatever you want. Can you make something like this pinwheel? And they gave you an example right here. Not as a challenge, but rather just as an idea. You are welcome to attempt to create that. You do have a function for drawing a hexagon, drawing a line of hexagons. You also have a function for drawing one single square, drawing a line of squares, or drawing staggered squares. Those are available to you. You are not required to use them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple program. You are more than welcome to create your own, or you are welcome to copy the one that I do. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is find the block that sets the width, which is right here. And this determines the thickness of your line. I'm just going to set it to a 2. I think 1 is a little bit too thin. I'm also going to use the set color block, which is right here, so that each of my lines has the same. You know what? Do they have the random one? Yeah, set color, random color. Let's use that one instead. This is just going to make it so that every time it draws a line, it'll be a different color. Then I'm going to get a loop, and we're going to do, well, leave it at 4 for now. But inside of here, I'm going to have a jump to 0 over 0. I'm going to go ahead and use that one. But I'm going to change the numbers to 200, 200. And the reason for that is that those numbers represent the center of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that intentionally. Then I'm going to use the function. Here's where I'm going to use a function of drawing a line of hexagons. And then I'm going to have them turn to the right by 45 degrees. And that's it. That's what I'm going to do for now. Let's see what it looks like. And I thought the way that I put it, that every line would be a different color. Now, I can fix that. First and foremost, he didn't go all the way around, and that's because he only did it 4 times. I think he would have to do it a total of 8 times in order for it to go all the way around. Also, I'm going to add the set color, random color in here under the 200, 200. And I'm hoping that that will mean that every hexagon will be a different, or rather, every line of hexagons will be a different color. Let's see if it works. Good. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, I think that looks pretty good. However, you are more than welcome to just copy this and just leave it like this. However, I am going to make a modification to it. Not to here, but rather in here, specifically to this one, drawing a line of hexagons. You see where it says jump forward by 25 degrees? I'm going to have him turn slightly also. So it's going to turn to the left just by a small number. How about 10 degrees? So it'll look like this, but instead of drawing straight rows of hexagons, they'll start to have a bit of a curve. Let's see what this looks like. Very cool. I may have to do more than 8 rows, however. I think that modification changed how many times it needs to happen. I believe it'll be 10. Also, please feel free to make any other modifications that you want when this is your turn. It's your shape. You can spend as much time or as little time as you want on here. And that's it. When you are finally satisfied with your product, you're welcome to click finish. And then click continue. Since that is the end of the unit, when you get to this picture, please remember you don't have to do anything. This simply indicates that you are done.